My wife and I were high school sweethearts who married right after graduation and before my military enlistment. We've now been married over 24 years. Recent revelations have turned my world upside down. Before I start, I want to explain that my wife suffered serious sexual abuse for 2 years as a child and suffers from severe borderline personality disorder, which was only recently diagnosed. Had we known about her mental health issues, we could have avoided what happened because we would have known what red flags to look for. This does not excuse her actions. She is still responsible for her decisions. 4 years after we got married, she had an affair with my best friend from the military. It was hard to accept and took me years to get over it, but I forgave them both. He disappeared for a few years while her and I spent a lot of time talking things out. When he came back, he was married, and we had a lot of talks and things returned to normal. He was like my brother and I loved them both. A few years later, my wife confessed that she had bisexuality tendencies but never explored them. It was an interesting conversation, but she never indicated it was anything more than a conversation. A year or so later, she went to a party with some coworkers and after some drinks, started messing around with her female coworker. She said it was awkward and uncomfortable and they didn't get very far. She confessed to me that same week, and while I was not happy, I dismissed it because I wasn't threatened by it. Not long after this, she started hanging out with an old friend from high school that I wasn't comfortable with. Our kids would hang out and watch movies at his place, and I went over there a few times when I wasn't working. Then she started hanging out there later, and one day, she came home at 6:30 a.m. and I was furious. She said I was overreacting and that they didn't do anything. She said they were just cuddling on the couch and watching a movie. I lost it, and a few days later, after I had time to calm down, I told her I didn't want her to see him again. She never went back but gave me a hard time about telling her who she could be friends with. 3 years later, we were having a conversation about her failed lesbian experiment when she confessed that she had sex with my best friend's wife a few months earlier. I was upset and asked if my friend knew about it, and she said no. While drinking, again, she said they were messing around and had sex. Again, I wasn't threatened by her messing around with another woman, and she said she was no longer having bisexuality tendencies. I was angry about doing it behind my back, not talking to me about her feelings and then waiting so long to tell me. This was in 2009. From 2009 to 2014, we faced a ton of hardships. 2012 was our worst year. My biggest problem came from a mostly sex-less marriage since our second daughter was born. By sex-less, I'm referring to 1 to 3 times a month if anything at all. I was romantic to her, giving her roses, buying her chocolate, making her dinner, taking her out and watching TV together on the couch. We didn't have a lot of money, so we made do. She just never appeared interested. I re-injured my back due to a military-related injury that made it hard for me to be as active as I'd like. I could lash out on days where my pain was the worst and could be miserable to be around. I was never violent, but I did my best to make up for it on the good days. I'm still waiting even today, 14 years later, to get the corrective surgery I need from the VA. On top of that, I was working full-time, was a full-time student in trying to get my business off the ground. I had a full plate on top of my back injury, but I made it a point of making time for her. She was suffering depression from the birth of our last daughter, and she would shut me out when I tried to talk to her. It started a lot of arguments and fights. She worked part-time and was mostly responsible for caring for the house. Unfortunately, the house was always filthy and any conversation about it always resulted in an argument and her telling me that I needed to help more. So, she started hanging out with some of the other soccer moms to vent her frustration, and I let it go because I didn't want her to stay stressed out. I was already working over 60+ hour weeks, attending school for 33+ hours a week, and in daily pain. I didn't want her to feel like me and wanted her to just try to enjoy herself and have a good time. From 2014 to Sept 2021, everything was fine. I graduated with my degree, my business was picking up. I was working less hours. We moved out of the city and into a rural community over an hour north. It was still a sex-less marriage, but we were enjoying each other's company a lot better. My back still hurts, and we occasionally have an argument, but nothing too serious. I was proud of our relationship, we were strong, and all was good. We even just bought a house this year. That was up until September 7th. I had always suspected she slept with her friend, and she had always denied it and even gave me a hard time about accusing her. It was just a feeling and I never had proof, but I believed it was true. My wife went on a weekend trip with my daughters, and I had to stay home to work. While they were gone, I had a serious nightmare about my suspicions and woke up in a sweat. The incident had occurred almost 15 years ago, but I still think of it occasionally, like a feeling of leaving your oven on after leaving your house. It just eats away at you. When she came home, I asked her about it. I was surprised when she finally admitted it, but was more surprised when she admitted to several more affairs, including a man she fell in love with in 2012. I was devastated, crushed. She told me that she never messed around with her friend until after I accused her of sleeping with him. She said that she went to his place, and they were drinking, and he made a move, and she didn't stop him. She said she hated it, and it made her feel disgusted. But the next weekend, she went out with him and some of her friends, and he started getting possessive of her. Her friends saw it and she was embarrassed. On the way home, she told him she didn't belong to him and that she loved me. She planned to stop hanging out with him. When she got home, this was when I said she couldn't see him anymore, and even thought she made that decision on her own. She gave me an attitude about it. The next affair she had was from Jan to Feb 2012. She had sex with my daughter's soccer coach who I knew from the games. He became friends with the soccer moms, and they would often hang out. One night, he calls her at work and the conversation turns to sex and they start going into the dirty details of their sexual fantasies. He invites her over after work, and even though she knew why he wanted her to come over, she went anyway. They started drinking and had sex. They got together 2 other times after that. In April of 2012, she met a guy at work who started talking to her. They started dating for a few months and were having sex in his car because he currently lives with his parents. They would have sex in random parking lots. I never met this guy, but he met my kids. She fell in love with him, and when she found out he was moving to Texas to be with his kids, they discussed her going with him. She realized I would fight her for custody and decided she couldn't go with him. She said after he left, she never had another affair because it was heartbreaking. This was all confessed on D-Day. It was a lot to take in, but she promised there was nothing else. The next day, we continued talking and some thoughts started popping in my head. I was talking to my best friend about what my wife was telling me, and he was consoling me. And then I realized that my wife slept with his wife, and I didn't know what he knew. I was concerned about ruining his marriage, so I asked my wife about it. I asked if my friend knew about them, and she didn't say anything. Warning bells went off in my head, so I asked if he was there. She didn't say anything. My blood started boiling and I asked if it was a threesome, and she said yes. She confessed that he called her and said his wife wanted to have a threesome, but she only trusted my wife. Supposedly, my wife asked his wife if it was true, and she said yes. They planned it out and met a few weekends later. The threesome started with my wife and my friend rubbing on his wife, but the only 2 people to have intercourse was my wife and my friend. He never had sex with his wife, who the threesome was supposed to be for. I exploded. We've been seeing a therapist for a few months. I'm hurting. I feel stupid, ashamed, enraged, disrespected. And I feel pathetic for even considering trying to work it out. She's been faithful for the last 9 years, so she says. But it doesn't change the facts of what happened. And yet I'm stuck between craving her touch and being disgusted by it. If it wasn't for the fact that her BPD was a large contributor to her decision-making, I would have dropped her. But as I learned more about her disorder, I realized the feelings she was having in our relationship was strongly impacted by mental illness. She would see only the negatives in our relationships, but never remembered the positives. It was either all good or all bad. She would be all clingy and loving or hateful and nasty. There was no middle ground there. There is a lot more to the story about D-Day and her confessions, the turmoil, and deceptions. But I'll save that for another post. For now, I just need some honest feedback. Thanks. Thank you all for reaching out, and I am hearing you. I can answer or respond to a few questions and comments about what happened. 1. The best friend is no longer a part of our lives. The moment I found out about the threesome, he was done. He has been purged from my social media, and she has done the same. He has been blocked and deleted from all of our accounts. Of all the affairs, this one has been the most emotional to deal with for several reasons I'll discuss later. He now lives thousands of miles away. 2. I was unaware of the affairs in 2012 and the threesome until a few months ago. When they were happening, she was able to hide them well because I trusted her and because I was working or attending school to better our situation. I was unaware she was dropping my kids off at a friend to run off with them. So, they were all disclosed at once in September. 3. We are both in therapy right now. I am seeing someone alone and we are attending marriage therapy. She is looking for her own therapist to work with individually. Insurance is her holdup. I am covered by the VA, and she is not. We are researching her mental illness and have already read a ton of books on the subject. I Hate You, Don't Leave Me, Borderline Personality Disorder Survival Guide for You and Your Relationship, UNF Your Brain, Loving Someone with BPD from the Husband's POV, and several more. And after reading those books, it was like reading an autobiography of our marriage. My wife and I talk every day. We set up rules and boundaries on how we converse, making sure we ask for breaks when things get too emotional or heated. She has become more intimate and works to make sure my feelings are addressed. She has also been working on when she starts having issues. When she gets mad or starts to think I'm being a jerk, she now stops and forces herself to reevaluate what I actually did or said and then calms herself down. I've caught her doing it a few times, so she is definitely working on how to cope and react when she has an episode. She is doing the work and being open and is showing the motivation to fix herself and our relationship, and she knows the degree to what she did. She has apologized and has now done everything to make sure I know what she is doing, who she talks to, where she is, and allows me free access to her phone at any time. As long as she is doing the work, there is a chance we can reconcile if I can get over what she did. The intrusive thoughts are one of the biggest problems I face with this. 4. Why did I forgive my best friend the first time? It was not easy. We were both getting out of the service, he a month before I was. We were going to be cops together and he didn't want to move back to his home state. When they had the affair, I was still out processing at my duty stations while they were in my home state, and they just hooked up. We were all very close at the time. They didn't hide it and told me, and it took me a few years to get over it. But when we started hanging out again, he had his own family and it felt normal, and there was no tension, and we let it go. It wasn't something that happened overnight or that I shrugged off. He was my brother, my closest friend. I never expected him to betray me again 8 years later. 5. My wife's BPD was diagnosed while seeing our marriage counselor. When she was being questioned about the affairs, she would explain her feelings when they happened. And the counselor noticed some of her behaviors matched traits for BPD, and she was diagnosed officially a few sessions later. She did not use the condition as an excuse, but it answered questions on why she thought the way she did back then, why she felt like she hated me, and why she felt I did not show her attention when I did. These were things she told the therapist before her diagnosis. It wasn't an excuse she thought to use. However, after learning about BPD, the warning signs were painfully obvious. We both missed them, and how I handled her during that time was the complete opposite of how her mental illness should have been treated. She knew what she did was wrong and did it anyway. She has no excuses for it. But neither of us were prepared to handle her diagnosis and didn't have the tools to be effective communicators, and that is something I do regret. I saw something was wrong, but thought she was just depressed. 6. My wife says she's been faithful for the last 9 years. I believe her for several reasons. The first is that we moved over an hour away from that area, from the city to a rural community where there were very few people. Second, she left all her friends behind. I was already reclusive due to my PTSD, and my best friend and his wife were really the only people I talked to. She started isolating herself as well because of where we lived and her own depression. Third, she stopped drinking, going from every week to maybe a few drinks a year. These are things she did on her own. She has worked for me, so when she gets to and leaves work, I know for a fact due to our GPS report system. She comes straight home and goes straight to work. Since we still have a nearly 2-hour work commute, it's hard for her to hide it. Fourth, our relationship got a lot better. She was becoming less standoffish, becoming more affectionate, and her demeanor towards me was better. She did not appear bitter. We started doing more things together as a couple, such as scuba diving, going on cruises, and just hanging out as a couple. 7. I've been in the hospital numerous times over the last few years for surgeries and injuries, and I get my blood tested pretty regularly by the VA. I seem to have labs every 6 months. All clear. Kids are mine. The time frames don't match up by years. And right now, the only people who know are our therapists and the APs. We have not disclosed to anyone else. She actually was the one who recommended I find a forum to go to and discuss my feelings, since I don't have any friends or family can talk to. 8. People criticizing my wife and saying there is more she's not telling me. I agree that there is a lot I still don't know. Because it was so long ago, she says there are some things she doesn't remember. There have been things she did not remember accurately, and some of those inaccurate recollections resulted in some serious arguments. But she now makes clear that when she recalls something, it's based on what she remembers, and she differentiates what she remembers as facts and what she believes to be true, but the details are fuzzy. For me, I want to believe her because she seems sincere, but she has seriously betrayed my trust, and I do have my doubts. However, we have her social media accounts, journal entries she has made from back then, and other information that has helped fill in the blanks. It has not been pretty, and it's been brutal reading the things she wrote back then. But understand this, she confessed to affairs I had no clue about. She could have continued denying it, but she didn't, and we've both been going through an emotional time right now. A lot of crying and arguing and consoling. She has given me some very brutal, gory details that I asked for. She has tried to shield me early in the discovery process, but now she is painfully brutal. And even though she has had 9 years to think and process what she had done, she is now writing my processing what happened with me. We have a long way to go, and what my final decision will ultimately be on whether or not I can get over it emotionally and mentally, and whether or not she keeps doing the work and doesn't revert back to her past behavior. I know that as someone with BPD, she has a hard fight, and I am willing to help her do that, but no longer at the expense of my emotions or mental health. Comment: I question the threesome story. If his wife was even there, I feel like there were other times she wasn't. Opus, I'm really sorry you're going through this. That you are still with this woman, no words. There's unlikely anything anyone could say to make you leave her. You've built in excuses for her in your head due to her BPD and her sexual abuse, which I do not minimize. That is horrible, and I feel so badly for her. But that doesn't explain or excuse her serial infidelity. And it doesn't give her carte blanche to abuse you. You're like a frog in water that's been heating up over the course of 24 hours that you don't even realize you're being boiled alive. Someone got this part right. You only get one life. Please enroll in some intensive therapy immediately. I'll say it, a healthy individual doesn't tolerate this. Wishing you well. Original poster: the threesome was a huge issue for us. First, for my best friend and his wife, who I thought of like family, to call my wife and ask her to do a threesome, and none of them even thought about me as straight up BS. Clearly none of them ever considered me when they planned it out, and that says a lot. My wife gave me the details, and I think it was a real threesome. When she originally told me the story, it was about having sex with his wife. Why lie about that to hide an affair between the two of them? A three-way betrayal is much worse than just the two of them. I had done a lot of things for them, helped them out in a lot of ways, and for them to do that was painful. I was always there for them emotionally, when they needed help financially, and when he needed support to get through the police academy. I always had their back. And while my wife is solely responsible for allowing it to happen because she should have said no, he should have never asked either. What bothers me is my wife's relationship with my best friend. For example, she said the threesome was about his wife. And when she told me the details about it, I told her the threesome was for him. They spent a significant amount of time giving his wife attention. But if the threesome was about his wife, then why was it that he and my wife were the only ones to have intercourse? I told her if the threesome was for his wife, they never would have had sex. He and his wife would. She disagrees with me, even still. When it was time to cut him from our lives, that was when she got upset the most. She claims it was because I would be throwing away a 21-year friendship. But to me it was because it would end their friendship. I felt that the second relationship she had in 2012 was with a guy who reminded her of my best friend. She says I am wrong, but there are too many similarities. Both are tall, 6'3" and 6'4". Both are the country boy types. Both are Ford guys. Both act in that stupid, goofy, funny way. Both wanted to be cops. They had the same hairstyle and facial hair, listened to the same types of music, etc. They even looked alike and had similar traits. But when I told her that she was looking for a replacement for my best friend, she strongly denies it, even still. So, the best friend is a raw topic for us. She claims she regretted it the moment she started to drive home, and it was never discussed between them again. But for me, I would talk to them, joke with them, hang out with them for years, and never knew this secret they had about my own wife. When it was disclosed, it was humiliating and shameful. You start thinking that during the whole time, they were laughing at you in their heads. And then you wonder how people who say they loved you and acted like they were your family could stoop so low. And this is why my inner circle looks like a dot. Betrayal by those closest to you ruin any chance to trust others in the future. And that's why I have a hard time making friends. Comment: thanks for the update. I still recommend you figure out what a deal breaker would be. I believe you will be in Sisyphus mode for some time. But as I used to have in my signature, according to Camus, we must imagine Sisyphus happy. Original poster: I am already at the breaking point. There will be no more chances. Frankly, her behavior and my emotional well-being are all that's holding this together. The thinnest of strings. One lie, one slip-up, the wrong comment in an argument, or if I have a bad day and I get an overwhelming intrusive thought, I'm done talking and I'm walking. The only reason why I am even still here is because it was over 9 years ago, because we have kids, because there were her undiagnosed mental health issues, and there are a lot of good things in our history as well that should have some value. She is putting in the effort to make it right. We'll see if she can. I don't have to walk away today. but I also don't have to stay forever either. I can bide my time and see how I feel, see if our therapy works, and then make a decision later. Comment: losing a friend who was as close as a sibling is also a hard loss. We have several threads in the I can relate section which might give you more insight, and maybe a little comfort. There's one about double betrayal, another about personality disorders, and one about finding out years later. Right now, I suspect you're feeling very alone in your situation. But you're not. Sometimes, it just helps a little to know that. Original poster: I am feeling lonely. No one to talk to about it except her and the therapists, but it's not the same as having a friend to confide in. But I've kept it close to vest to protect my kids and to avoid feeling like I'm getting stared out. My sister is a gossip, my mom is judgmental, and if we reconcile, my mom may never give her a fair shake, and that'll be another stressors in our life we don't need. So, it gets to be hard. She does her best to listen, but sometimes I just want to vent angrily, and that's not helpful. First, thanks for the comments. I really appreciate the feedback as I evaluate where my life goes from here. But I do want to address a few issues. 1. Neither my wife nor I blame her BPD for her affairs. She has taken full responsibility because she made those decisions on her own. Her diagnosis came during our marriage therapy, not before. And it was our therapist who pointed out that while she made the decisions, she was influenced by her BPD. The symptoms of BPD include self-destructive behavior, impulse control problems, boundary problems, have hard time maintaining relationships and pushing people away, risky sexual behavior, mood swings, and the worst is splitting. Imagine hating the person you are married to because of a reason that only exists in your mind. I mean truly hate. After I talked with her friends at the time, the way she described me to them was horrible. She accused me of treating her horribly, ignoring her, and not giving her the attention she wanted. She truly disregarded the good things because her mind wouldn't let her consider them. They have said after I talked to them that they didn't know who I really was. It was night and day to them. In her mind, I was Satan, and that did play a part in her decision-making. 2. For 24 years, I was married to 2 people, my wife and who Robert Page calls the crazy in his book BPD from the husband's POV. The problem was that I didn't know it at the time. It was a doomed relationship because she always had the crazy pushing her against me, and I never saw the signs. None of her friendships lasted, almost always ending with her cutting them off after a disagreement or argument. I'm the longest personal relationship she has ever had. She's now lived with me longer than her parents, and she has shut them out a few times, too. So, she has never had successful long-term relationship without conflict. The crazy has forced her to push them away. Since her diagnosis, with therapy and research, we have used new techniques to communicate. I'm cognizant of her feelings and how to address them when she has an issue. I know how to react to her mood swings better, how to make her feel safe, and get her to open up. These were things we couldn't do before because we were unaware. Since her diagnosis, our relationship has gotten stronger, and I am now better prepared to help her through her struggles with BPD. If I ultimately decide reconciliation is how to proceed, I am aware of how much work I am going to have to put in to make it work. But so does she. 3. Yes, I am angry. I want her to suffer. I think of revenge against her APs all the time. And I know I can get it. I've never wanted to hit my wife before, but D-Day almost pushed me to that point. How I felt and how I feel now eats me up inside. She apologizes every day. She does her therapy. She reads on her diagnosis. I see her doing the work. That makes me happy. But I also get intrusive thoughts that ruin my day and put me in a funk. I was recently sick with pneumonia, and I was having nightmares when I slept, and it exacerbated what I was feeling. There are times when she touches me, I don't want her to because I feel disgusted. Like I can somehow feel all of her APs. So, I'm well aware of the trauma I'm facing from the betrayal. But something I learned from her BPD, looking at this as all good or all bad is disabling and destructive. I can look at her affairs and make my marriage about those moments, and only those moments, and make her and my marriage into something bad that should be disposed of. But if I look at the entirety of my marriage, I can accept those are just the bad moments, but that there are also more good moments as well. Things we've done on vacations together, the cuddling around a burn pit, the enjoyment of completing a dive together, enjoying watching our kids succeed as a couple, reading each other's thoughts, just holding hands as we walk together, road trips we have taken together, just living in the moment together. And then there are the tragedies we went through together, me saving her life from carbon monoxide poisoning, the deaths of friends and family members, my health problems and surgeries, and her being there for my PTSD. When I have a nightmare, she's there for me. We are not defined by her affairs. Our marriage is not defined by her affairs. 4. She broke down and started crying and told me she broke me. She pointed out that in the last 24 years, she could count how many times she has seen me cry on her hand. Since D-Day, it's been a lot more often. She feels remorse. She didn't have to confess, she did. And now she regrets telling me because of the pain she has seen me endure, but still thinks it was the right thing to do. She is trying to make it right. It's double hard for her. However, I have decided that I wasn't given a fair shake with her. So, I bail now that I know how to deal with her problems. We should have gotten therapy before. I felt it was weak to do so because that was how I was brought up. Men can fix their own problems. We don't need strangers telling us what to do. I was wrong. People with BPD fear abandonment. Would abandoning her now as she is trying to rebuild her mental health a cruel idea? Wouldn't that feed the crazy and prove to her she is worthless and everyone will leave her? Is my anger and pain more important than helping someone who has been torn apart by her uncontrolled inner demons for nearly her entire life? Didn't I promise to support her in sickness and in health? And isn't BPD a sickness? Right now, my recovery is about doing my own therapy and making myself better. But I also know that she needs help too, and I'm going to help her. CBT, DBT therapy to start. Whether we D or R, I'll be there to help her, because that's what I promised to do. All I can do is wait, process my anger and pain, get help to be better and be there for her. And maybe mail a box of manure to her affair partners. I don't know. I still love her, but what she's done is almost unforgivable. It's going to take me time to process it. But I owe it to me, not her, to consider if we can get a fresh start with the right tools. Thankfully, I'm not in a hurry and I can give myself the time I need to make that consideration from a good place in my mind and not from an emotional state. However, are you familiar with the sunk cost fallacy? Yes, the flaw with this theory is that it requires the ending to be an expected failure. That does not apply in this case. As they say, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. In our case, we are not doing the same thing. She has applied herself in her treatment and in therapy. She is opening up and being less resistive to conversations. She now understands what her mind is doing to her, and she has the tools to fight them. These are all different behaviors. It's a different path for her. That means the ending here is unknown. It's not the same behaviors or mistakes being repeated. So, the sunk cost fallacy doesn't apply. Each of us is nothing other than the sum of our actions. Your marriage is in fact defined by her affairs, but not solely by her affairs. It is of course defined by the sum of her actions. Hating you, vilifying you to others, using that negative energy to justify infidelity marked by an extreme level of contempt and cruelty. What you say here has merit, but it's also a complex situation. Her hatred and vilification were not her attempt to justify having an affair. It was her mind splitting from the borderline personality disorder, creating a reality where the only thing she could see was the negative things in our marriage. She could only see the arguments, not the moments of love and compassion. Her mind told her that everything I did was a slight to her and I was abandoning her. She believed it to be true, even to this day. She thought of me as the worst human being ever and wanted to escape, and her affairs gave her people she attached to. Some of the symptoms of BPD is impulsive behavior and risky sexual behavior. Some BPD patients have multiple partners because they fear abandonment, and for them, having a backup protects them. They see only the good in an AP, ignoring the disrespectful behavior they show to them and their families. I was the villain because the crazy within her said I was, and because neither of us knew she was having that problem. She took it as reality, and my response to her behavior was frustration and anger. So no, her affairs do not define our marriage. She lived in a world where she was always going to be abandoned, and her husband hated her and didn't show her attention. If anything, the first years of our marriage may have been defined by her BPD, but not her affairs. As you describe it, the good times are few, fleeting, mostly involve your kids. You've not described any good times that involve a high degree of sexual brio from her directed to you. I never said that at all. We've had plenty of good times together, and I only mentioned our kids once and what we do together. We do things together when we can, and when we do, we have fun. And I didn't bring up the times we had sex on the beach, or in a tent, or any of the other things we have done. I didn't say sex was lacking, I said it was infrequent. When we got it on, it was great. Sometimes she was vanilla, but sometimes she wasn't. But it was enjoyable. At some point, if a married couple grows old together, there is a decent likelihood one may be called upon to provide physical care, and even palliative care to the other. When this happens, the caregiving spouse is him or herself old and frail. If it's you, will you have the drive to provide this to her? For most spouses in this stage, that drive is fueled by the stored memory of the tenderness and love received from the care-needing spouse. If the tables are turned, will she have the empathy and capacity to be your caregiver? Will you be able to rely on her? Where did you get this from? First, she has already taken care of me. From my repeated back injuries that have taken months to heal from, to a heart procedure over a decade again, to gallbladder removal, to leg injury that took me down for 3 months, etc. She has been there for me reliably. In fact, it is often when she is most attentive to me because I was not a threat to her BPD's fear of abandonment. I'm just saying that while she made the decision to have her affairs, she does have a valid reason to have the fears and thoughts she did. She could have communicated with me or saw a therapist. She chose to cheat. Those hurts. The things she said and thought also hurts. But it also hurts to learn that she was misled by her mind into thinking I was abandoning her. It hurts to think that had I paid more attention to her behavior, I may have realized she was dealing with more than depression. And our therapist woke us up to every single sign we missed. Now I watch her break down and cry as she tries to learn what emotions are real and what are not. BPD is not a joke, and it hurts to watch her try and fight through sudden bursts of emotions. So, for me, I have to face her betrayals, my best friend's betrayals, her BPD, and try to recover while understanding that she isn't evil or cruel or wanted to hurt me. She's a victim as much as she is an adulterer. So, it is hard to separate the two sometimes. Our situation is cruel and painful. Because I can already anytime. I don't need to hurry to make a decision. But just remember that the information I have shared is not everything in our lives. There are moments we shared that are just as momentous as our worst moments. Before I kill our marriage, I owe it to me to see if we can make it right now, knowing the tools to communicate and make each other feel connected. I think as a husband who vowed to be with her in sickness and in health, I can't abandon her just when she is learning she has something wrong with her. And so far, our therapists have agreed that this is a good step for us. First, I want to make clear that I'm not upset or taking anyone's advice negatively. It's hard to take context from written correspondence. I'm also not getting defensive. I just want to make sure that there is a context in play people are aware of and to not just treat it like a normal affair. Second, I'm here because even though her BPD is a major component of her behaviors, the feelings I have are the same as other betrayed spouses. I still get the feelings of anger, shame, disrespect, emasculating loss of self, etc. I find myself in a place without friends to talk to about this. I can't vent or get feedback from anyone except our therapists. Because this is shameful and embarrassing, I can't find myself talking to anyone about it in my personal circle. The only person I thought I could talk to slept with her, so that means trusting anyone else will be hard. Don't want to discuss this with family because I don't want those judgmental eyes staring at either one of us if we are, but right now, I'm consumed by feelings of wanting revenge against her APs. The fact I'm hurting and going through this, and they get off without consequences, bothers me. They all knew she was married, and they didn't care. It'd be different if they didn't know, but they did. I've met most of them. They all met my kids, so I want them to hurt back. And knowing I can hurt them, but I'm not, hurts me even more, like I'm letting them walk all over me. Third, my treatment consists of seeing an individual therapist and a marriage counselor. We've been given books to read as homework, and I'm going over the impacts of the affair on my life. I'm already dealing with PTSD for another issue, so this made things worse. But I'm working on me, and I have established boundaries with her on what I need and what I expect from her. Fourth, what has she done to help me heal? Please, a key issue to reconciling from infidelity is IMHO that the betrayed spouse totally 100% refuses any accountability for the WS decision to cheat. She has taken 100% accountability for her actions. Her BPD may put her mind in the position to cheat, but she knew it was wrong and still chose to do it. She could have said no, but instead drank to lower her own inhibitions to make it easier to say yes. She wanted to cheat. She admits it. She has told me what she remembers, including very detailed descriptions of what happened. The only time she tried to hide something was the threesome, but she confessed to that on the second day. While there are some questions she still hasn't answered because she says she can't remember. It has been nearly a decade and she has told me far worse things to hear than any of the answers I've asked for. I have access to her phone, accounts, even the secret one she used to hide her affairs. I have read her journals, then and now, to see what she was thinking. She has been transparent. I get enraged sometimes by what I'm told or read, but I listen. It was her idea to post here to vent because I was bottling it up. But we talk daily. She answers questions whenever they pop in my mind. So, she helps me with my recovery. What if, 2 years from now, you miss out on her being angry at you for forgetting her birthday? Could that trigger a reasonable response from her to have another affair? That's a legitimate concern. It's her biggest fear. But in 2 years, she'll have a better understanding of her BPD and the tools to control it. Right now, she doesn't trust herself and has closed nearly all of her social media accounts and dropped all of her friends. She had isolated herself, but she's read more books the last month than the last few years, and she's learning the tools to evaluate her emotions to understand them. IMHO, you seem too quick to blame the recently diagnosed BPD, at least in part or indirectly, for her decisions to commit adultery. Keep in mind, many people have BPD and don't cheat. I keep reading this from people. I'm not blaming the BPD for her affairs. She had choices, she chose to cheat. That's on her. But she does have BPD, and it does cause impulsive and self-destructive behavior. And BPD does influence life choices. I cannot disregard either of those facts. She chose to cheat. And she does have BPD, as diagnosed by 2 therapists. As for the remark that many people with BPD don't cheat, that's not the argument. The real argument is how many people who cheat have BPD. Marriage therapist who specializes in marriages of people with personality disorders wrote, "Serial infidelity has been correlated with personality disorders. To be specific, 3 personality disorders: narcissism, borderline personality disorder, and psychopathy. Borderline personality disorder is characterized by unstable emotions. They are partners who are fundamentally emotionally unstable and inherently unreliable. They are also poorly organized, careless, and self-indulgent. They find it very difficult to resist temptation, maintain personal boundaries, and resist attractive others. The essential problem with BPD is poor impulse control, compromised adult reasoning, and an inability to self-soothe and express empathy. In all intimate relationships, including illicit ones, a person with borderline personality disorder will often display irrational jealousy, emotional volatility, and may become both physically and emotionally abusive. For such people, love is subordinated to intense feelings of painful yearning and powerful desire. Thus, people with BPD are often compelled to chase partners who are emotionally unavailable. Their yearning is fueled by the chaos and drama of pursuing an unattainable partner. Infidelity and BPD does have some connection to each other, and in undiagnosed patients, it's a time bomb. This is why her treatment is important to my recovery. If she cannot utilize her treatment and maintain control of herself through CBT, DBT therapy, or maintain my boundaries, then we can't. Or if I don't help her, then it's counterproductive to her mental well-being, making her feel the abandonment she fears internally. And we can't. Or so we have to work and help each other, because if I can't see her putting in the work, I'll never trust her again. And we can't. Or helping her means I can process why she did what she did as I go through her journey to understand her BPD. But I do have my limits. She must attend therapy for her BPD. She must be honest with me about everything. Any lies and I'm out. She must be transparent about everything. If an AP reaches out, she must tell me. She must also tell them not to contact her ever again and block them. She must tell me anything she remembers about her affairs that we haven't discussed. She must tell me her feelings when she gets upset so we can keep her emotions under control. BTW, that's been working out great. We've had less arguments now as we process her emotions when she gets upset. It's interesting how little a thing can trigger a response from her. Lastly, I think we need to be careful on how we give advice to people. We all hurt, but we were all hurt in different ways. I think we need to be careful and not transfer our stories to another person. I think telling someone who caught their spouse in just an emotional affair or sexting situation to DNA test their kids or get an STD test might be excessive. And people are quicker to tell others to get an attorney than they are to get therapists. You can get a divorce anytime, but mental health recovery needs to start right away. Maybe we can start focusing on the betrayed person and ask them what they feel and what they want, and help them get to a point where they can decide what they need. Instead of saying get a DNA test on the kids, we ask if there is a concern about the timing of their affair and when their kids were born. No sense telling someone whose spouse just had an affair this year to get a DNA test on their 12-year-old kid. It's already stressful, and poisoning their thoughts makes it worse. Being direct sometimes makes things worse. We just need to build them up to a point where they can take it in. Follow the stages of grief and help them process where they are. That's why I'm here.